You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly Requa, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
Welcome to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly Requa. Today we're talking with Dr. Susan McMillan, owner of Vet2Pet Mobile Veterinarian Service in Burlington, Vermont, regarding can your dog drink beer? With all the local craft breweries popping up around the country, how worried should we as dog owners be if your dog drinks some suds? It's my two favorite, beer and dogs.
Right. Hi, Polly.
So welcome, Susan.
Well, it's a subject close to my heart as well. So how worried should we be if our dogs drink beer? Mostly I'm going to say, let's not worry too much, but I'm going to follow that up, as I always do, with about 5 minutes of caveat, but if your dog tips over your can of beer and laps it up, or as my cat used to do, sticks her paw in my wine glass and then starts lapping it up, okay, I'm not going to panic or freak out. Everything's going to be fine. But, you don't want your dog to, drink a whole can of beer. A lot of these things are weight dependent a little bit. So if your big lab who's young and healthy drinks a beer, it's okay. I wouldn't encourage it, as funny as it is, or as funny as it seems. But, if you have a little old toy poodle who's got kidney disease, I don't want him, lapping down your Jack Daniels.
Sure.
I'll broaden into liquor generally, because, it can cause kidney problems, liver problems, not to mention just intoxication, and then I've heard of dogs drinking liquor and literally wandering off into the woods and then into the local lake, so everything's fun and games until someone, drinks too much.
Right.
So, and then a couple of the other things that we don't really think about, but things like fruitcake, those are soaked in liquor. That's the kind of thing a dog would easily scarf off the counter. You come home and you're kind of angry, but you don't really think about the fact that that was full of Jack Daniels or whiskey. And 3 hours later, your dog's puking and staggering, and his eyes are, have nystagmus. So that can be a problem. Another thing that sometimes happens is dogs will get into yeast, as in uncooked bread dough.
Oh, sure.
Stuff like that. And that's an alcohol problem. Yeast, we use it so that it will rise. And if a dog eats a bunch of bread or dough before it's risen, then, they can bloat, and it can become very, very dangerous pretty quickly. So that's another place you can kind of have a problem with alcohol where you don't really think about it.
And I actually interviewed a woman who she gets all of the information around the country of brew pubs that allow dogs.
Oh.
And so it was kind of interesting. And then so I wanted to have you on as well because all these dogs, they don't sell food so that they can allow their owners to bring the dogs in. So it's like a doggy daycare, and you're at a brew pub.
Interesting.
Yep. And these dogs are running around. At one place I saw, they were running around the back.
Wow.
And so that's really, I'm sure if they get thirsty because they can't find the water bowl.
Yeah,
they're,
exactly. If they start lapping up a bunch of beer, you're going to have potentially a minimum of vomiting and diarrhea, which are maybe not life-threatening, but definitely a drag for your dog and the inside of your car, Right. But also, any of those things that start out as kind of like not a big deal because you have a young, healthy, big dog, they're not so funny when it's a smaller dog or maybe a big dog who's, a little bit fragile because he's older or he's got some problems. So basically what I try to tell people, because it's so easy for us to kind of blow off these things, like we've all had big dogs get into a bag of M&Ms and nothing happened. So all of a sudden you start thinking, chocolate's not a big deal. My dog gets into Easter candy all the time and nothing happened. But then, you get a different dog and a different kind of chocolate, and you are back in toxic territory. Mm-hmm. So, when it comes to the beer and stuff, I would say that what I try to tell people is, is it something that you would let your little kid, is it something that you would let them do? Because, if you're not going to let your little kid lap down a whole beer, then you probably just don't want your dog to do it, Yes. And like I said, you don't have to freak out about it if you see your dog at a brew pub and it turns out he's lapping up someone's spilt beer. But, don't encourage it and put a stop to it as soon as you notice it. And, it's so easy for us to just ignore these little things, but that's what emergency rooms are full of, is that, like I said, it's all fun and games right up until you realize your dog is really sick.
So, Susan, if dogs do ingest beer, what are some of the signs? You said, diarrhea, excessive panting.
Yeah, I would say almost the same list as if you or I drink too much beer. Drooling.
I don't think that's ever happened.
No, not even once, I'm sure. Certainly not at any of our family gatherings.
No.
Drooling, vomiting, obviously like a bloated stomach, increased heart rate, and then some more obvious ones like weakness, staggering, collapse. Basically, drunk dog whose systems are not tolerating the alcohol very well.
Okay.
And in that case, what you probably want to do, if an animal isn't acting real intoxicated, if you really thought they got into a lot of booze, I guess the best thing might be to get them to throw up right away. It's almost like with a person. If you're not so drunk that you're going to aspirate when you throw up, I hate to say it, but if you drink too much, your best bet is to get it out of your system now before you absorb it all.
Okay.
So, if you do encounter your dog and you caught him like literally drinking up a thing of Jack Daniels, you may want to get him to throw up right away. You never, ever, ever want to do that if there's any sign that the animal is already intoxicated, staggering, not in control, because we're all susceptible to aspirating when we vomit.
Okay.
And then you have not just a dog who has alcohol toxicity, but they may aspirate their vomit, and now you have aspiration pneumonia, and now you're definitely headed for the emergency room, and you might not make it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I should, when I'm at these brew pubs, and even the distillery here, I should just make sure that they know to gate the area where the barrels are, so that dogs, because every person in business here, you're allowed to bring your dogs to work.
Yeah, it sounds like a really dog friendly town.
Yeah.
Without being the freaky dog person, I would just say if there's, if the place is totally clean and the floor is spotless, maybe not so much of a concern, but if there's anywhere where they can get into the hops or yeast or the beer, it's a way better public relations thing to not let your customer's dog get sick than to have open access to everything.
Right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
And I am the crazy dog person, according to my children, so
I don't want you to be I don't want you to be the crazy dog Nazi. Obviously, because I always want to be cautious, because you don't want to be the freaky one who pretends that 2 laps of some beer is going to make your dog sick. Well, it's not. People won't listen to your message if you act like it's total poison. But enough alcohol in the wrong dog is going to be a problem.
Sure. Sure.
You know?
And in my case with my lab, you had a little marijuana that she
Exactly.
ate, and then it's a full-on party for these dogs.
Exactly. Like I said, it's all fun and games until, someone drinks out of the bong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, probably have heard this, but, since marijuana has become legal in so many more states, the poison control places that deal with dogs and the emergency rooms are just full of dogs that have OD'd on edibles and gummy bears and all of that, So I guess I'll do a shout out to everyone. If you have flavored vitamins, flavored dog medication, whether it's your heartworm medication or your, Rimadyl, or you've got edibles, or you have whatever, just put it way out of reach of your kids and your dog and your cat. Because pets are always getting into that flavored stuff that is not meant for them, or they're supposed to get one a month and they eat a year's worth.
Yeah, well, Maddie loves the Flintstones vitamins. And
aren't your kids a little old for Flintstones vitamins?
No, well, at least they take them.
Yeah, that's true.
They just take more of them. But we've come home multiple times where the red, container is all over the house.
Trashed.
Yeah.
A lot of times that's just kind of a drag, and maybe your dog gets diarrhea or maybe she throws up. But, every once in a while you can get like maybe you get a big vitamin D overdose or something. There are things that happen from incidents like that. It seems like such an innocuous event, but it really can be dangerous in the right pet.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. I have animal poison control on my speed dial.
You have a magnet on your refrigerator, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I'll put that number in the show notes because it is something that I think every pet owner should have just in case. Especially you never know what they're going to get into. It's worth the phone call, and it's not worth you just thinking, well, how dangerous can that be? It's probably fine. That's the famous last words, because just it's worth a phone call. You call, you ask someone who knows, and they probably ask you, like, how much does your pet weigh? How much do you think he got? And then they do a calculation, and then they say, you're probably going to be okay. Or they say, hey, you better know where your emergency room is. Right? ASAP. Yeah. So, all good tips, and I'm glad I kind of have a baseline. I can now watch these businesses as the freaky dog mom, and definitely I'll say something to them. But thank you for being on the podcast, and we look forward to having you back. Cool. Always fun, Polly. I'll talk to you later. Okay. Thank you. Bye. Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.